Hello, novices. I will be your guide, your sage on the side, Professor Moose. The point of this podcast is to give you a guide, to give you a handhold, to provide some way for you to cope with the ever-changing, tumultuous vicissitudes of life in the modern era. In other words, we're here to help you learn to even. Let's take a moment to thank our corporate sponsors. Learn to Even is brought to you by BBC Root Beer. BBC Root Beer. When things get hot and your thirst is being a real bee, tell that bee to be cool with a BBC Root Beer. Made from all-natural Greenville amber water and the finest roots and spices which can be found along Highway 61. Nothing cools down a hot bee like a cold BBC. This is Professor Moose. Welcome to episode 2. So, novices, hello all you cool cats and kittens out there. No, I'm not going to do that. That's cheap. It's a cheap laugh. I'm not going to do it. So, what's going on? What are we doing out there in quarantine land? I see, some of the restrictions are starting to ease up a little bit. Went out to pick up some dinner tonight and had to go inside the restaurant to get it. And lo and behold, there were about a half dozen tables with people sitting at them, dining just like it's normal. And, we're in the world of pre-March 2020. A few people at the bar picked up my food, left. I was wearing a mask. No one else inside except for the wait staff. We're dressed like a costumed Avenger, but it seems like there's definitely sort of some folks sort of wiggling back into what we considered the norm. So, what have you been doing in this time to occupy your stay at home? We haven't left the house much. My house, it's comfortable. It's homey, and we're homebodies. We like being here. But we've been spending a lot of time on Netflix, a lot of time on Hulu, playing PlayStation, computer games, video games, binging, streaming media. I'm a big fan of YouTube. I have a little YouTube channel. And someday I may share a little bit about that. But I've been playing a lot of online games, Facebook word games. One of the games I like to play is called Star Trek Timelines. You can play it through your Apple or Android device. You can also play it through Facebook Games. It's free to play. But like any free-to-play game, there are multiple opportunities for in-app purchases. But I'm a Star Trek fan, and so I play it. It's been enjoyable. I've also been listening to ASMR videos. If you don't know what that is, ASMR is an initialism which stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. And it's sort of characterized by sights and sounds that lead to an intense calming effect or a tingling sensation, especially in the scalp, back of the neck, upper spine area. Some people have equated it to kind of like the chills you might get when listening to a moving piece of music. But according to scientists in the field, brain chemistry, psychology, and where those two things intersect, it's not exactly the same phenomenon. It only seems to affect a small portion of the population. I have a couple of friends who it affects as well, my wife not being among them. And so, it's sort of, everyone has their own trigger when it comes to ASMR or triggers. Some people enjoy things like crinkling plastic, things like touching the microphone, brushing, tapping things, close up. Different little things. Some people enjoy the sounds of people eating or chewing, crinkling plastic, writing. If you've got something that's, makes a little bit of sound when you write, stuff like that. And it's kind of weird. Everybody says, everybody kind of has their own brand or their own flavor of tingle triggers, as they're called. A lot of things, you sort of love them or hate them. One person's trash is another person's treasure. And it really depends on the individual. I remember one of the earliest times that I ever experienced this sensation, ASMR. I think I was probably about 9 years old. It was a little before Valentine's Day. And I had gone to my father's place of business, and there was a drugstore down the street that I would frequent from time to time. It was run by one of my father's friends. And there was a jewelry store in between. And so I decided to stop in at the jewelry store and purchase something for a young lady in my class who I thought was, pretty special. And so I went in with a $20 bill in my pocket. And at 9 years old, in the 80s, that was big money. So I went in and I found a nice little heart-shaped Austrian quartz pendant, which is a very nice marketing term for glass. And so I, picked it out and I handed the man my money. And the man behind the counter, put the pendant in a little paper bag, stapled it. And the shop had these big metal boxes that they kept carbon copy receipt paper in. And it's probably about the size of a, what would it be the size of? What can I compare it to? It's probably about the size of a Harry Potter book. Okay. So he picks this up, and it's got, you take receipts and you push the receipt books down into this metal box. They're held up with a spring, and as you tear them out and hand them out and put them on file, it pushes the next set of receipts up. So the man took the receipt book, and I was standing there, package in hand, patiently waiting for my receipt and my change. I think the pendant was somewhere around $15 or perhaps 16 and change, something like that. And he took a silver cross pin out of the front pocket of his button-down shirt. For those of you that don't know about fine writing utensils, cross pins are, they're good pins. When you're talking about spending $20 to $50 or more on a pen, cross pins are fairly accessible. It's not a Mont Blanc. It's not going to, set you back $1,000. But they're great graduation presents and, things, presents for people that work in an office. So he takes the cross pin out of his pocket and he starts to write the receipt. Well, he's writing the receipt and he's making very slow, deliberate, careful marks with the pen. He's, checking boxes. He's writing information in cursive on this receipt, and the little metal box that's about the size of a book, as the ballpoint is going across the receipt and the carbon paper under it, it's sort of resonating in a very quiet but definitely noticeable, sort of hollow scratching sound. And as I stood there, the moment became almost timeless. My scalp started to tingle. I could feel sort of a tingling down the side of my arm. and no, I wasn't having a stroke, but it was more of a skin sensation. But I also felt incredibly relaxed. It was almost like hypnosis. I was almost in a trance, and I wanted to live in those few seconds of the man writing out the receipt for this pendant I had bought forever. And once I had experienced it, I didn't, even fathom to think that I could seek out stimulus to reproduce that. But over the years, I would find something that sort of brought it up. Watching Bob Ross, watching Bob Ross paint, watching people prepare food who are like not in a hurry, just standing there quietly cutting vegetables or something like that. Especially things where people are like focusing their attention and using their hands. Watching my mother do like macrame and do knitting was kind of a trigger. And then later on in life, I learned that there was a name for this phenomenon. And once I discovered that, I began to read on the subject. There's some excellent books on the subject. There's not a lot of what we would consider good scientific research that's been published. If you're out there looking for, an area to publish on, to do research on, starting an ASMR study to where it could be, really studied in sort of clinical conditions where results could be published might be a fertile field to put that seed in. Learn to Even is also brought to you by an endowment from Noblesk Pharmaceuticals, the makers of Trankadone. Noblesk, making the world better than you deserve. As I began to learn more about it, I discovered that all over YouTube, there were people who were making videos just for the purpose of, letting other people enjoy this ASMR, autonomous sensory meridian response. And I began to sort of delve into them. Of course, like most people in the community, I found things that I liked, and I found things that I didn't like, and I found things that were sort of close to it. It also seems to be one of those kinds of things where you can become somewhat desensitized to it. If I'm watching, some of those old videos that really sort of, scratch the itch for me, and they're not scratching it quite like they used to, I'll put it down for a few days and then come back to it, because it's easy to overdo it. If you're it's like tasting. If you're tasting salt all the time, then you become acclimated to the stimuli, and so it's you've got to sort of ease off and let yourself kind of get to that point where you haven't been bombarded with it. There are several YouTube channels I like. There's one called Dr. T, Dr. Tingles. There are others, things like videos of people shining shoes, videos of people putting together puzzles. And most all of these videos, there's visual and auditory triggers. So things are usually very closely mic'd. The noise is very carefully removed from the recordings. Things that aren't really loud in the real world are given close-up mic volume prominence in these recordings. So something like opening a bag of chips goes from, something you hear a few feet away to something that's mic'd, just inches away from the microphone. And so it becomes, you can hear every sort of crackle and pop the plastic or mylar as you open a bag of chips. And for some people, I mean, it does it. Their eyes roll back in their head. They start to drool a little bit because they become intensely relaxed. Their head and their arms tingle. Arms are a big thing for me. Like when I'm watching an ASMR video, I'm usually doing it in bed with headphones on, so I don't, bother anyone. But I'll start to feel the tingles on my arms, and I'll, I'm kind of sitting there, laying there with my arms crossed, and I'll just, lightly touch my forearm or my arm with the tips of my fingers, and it sort of like begins to multiply that sensation. It's incredibly relaxing. I tried to explain it to a friend of mine who is also a college professor, and I remember he has a young daughter, and she was in the room, and he asked me, "Is this a sexual thing?" And I said, "No, it's not." But it kind of is. Not totally. I mean, I'm saying it can be. If you definitely go looking for ASMR videos, you're going to find things that are fairly innocent. Someone, doing a puzzle, someone cutting up construction paper, maybe even someone just, unboxing, an Amazon package. But you'll also find plenty of sort of not even really risque, but definitely, dangling a certain bait for viewers. Lots of examples of girls doing ASMR videos with very low cut tops. Their cleavage prominently featured as a part of the visual experience. So I'm careful about who I share ASMR with, because I don't want people to get the wrong impression. It's not a kink, and even if it was, I mean, I'm not here to kink shame anybody. In the words of a good friend of mine, we'll just call him Captain Brian. I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum, and but yeah, I mean, it's a little on the weird side. So, you just, you don't sit down at a job interview and start telling people how much you love ASMR, and they go look at videos and they're like, what the hell does this freak into? But, it's, for the people that get it, you get it. And for the people that don't, I mean, it's a little harmless, fun, a little harmless entertainment, for those of us that are sort of, susceptible to it. Speaking of other, I guess we could say socially, not taboo, but socially slightly out of the mainstream, are role-playing games. And I'm not talking about the kinky, sexy role-playing games where you're a professor and your wife definitely has not been coming to class, and she really needs an A on her midterm, and okay, perhaps that's too specific, but what I'm trying to get at is it's not the kind of role play that necessarily is going on in your bedroom. It's the kind of role play that happens with friends. It's playing pretend with a rule book. It's sitting down around a table or in a living room with character sheets and dice, pencils, Mountain Dew, and the obligatory Funyuns, and just kind of playing pretend. It's inexpensive fun. It's easy to kill 3 or 4 hours, and you get to hang out with your friends. And that's been something I've done for years and years and years, decades now, going back to my time in college. But of course, in the quarantine era, it's hard to get together. So our role-playing gaming sessions. And when I say role-playing games, let me just go ahead and throw the D word out there. Dungeons and Dragons. That's the big one we're talking about. That's the one everybody knows. There are hundreds and hundreds of other different role-playing games. Games where you can play a pirate, games where you play a vampire, games where you play a police investigator. You name it. There's if there's a movie or a book or a TV show for it, chances are there is a role-playing game equivalent. But Dungeons and Dragons is like the most famous. It's the one that everybody knows. And it's one that's popular, and it's popular for a reason. It's accessible, it's fun. I've had a game of Dungeons and Dragons going now for the better part of 20 years. People have come into the game and left the game, as sort of your social circle changes. But it's creative fun. It's fun if you are creative. It gives you the chance to sort of take yourself out of your mundane life where things are hectic and you don't have any magical superpowers or a axe to deal with those situations, and gives you a situation where you do have magical superpowers and an axe or something like that to deal with the things that are causing you stress. It gives you the opportunity to be a comedian, on a stage with 5 or 6 other people. It's a mixture of improv theater and board game and stuff like that. And it's a lot of fun. And I would encourage anyone that is listening that has not tried it to seek it out, to give it a try, read about it, watch some YouTube videos about it. There are a couple of excellent episodes of the sitcom Community that feature Dungeons and Dragons, and they're definitely a cheesy, goofy send-up of the game, but there's also definitely some kernels of truth in what you'll see in those episodes. But it's something to kill time, and that's what a lot of us are doing right now is killing time. Those people that are first responders and essential workers, they're out there risking their health, risking their life day after day, doing what they have done since before the pandemic hit. And then the rest of us who can't work or who can work but are working from home, find ourselves now sort of isolated from those people we used to hang out with. And Dungeons and Dragons is one of those things that if you have a Zoom account, or if you've got, say, Google Hangouts or the Discord app or any of those other sort of social video conferencing options, you can do. Everyone has a character sheet and a pencil. You can get dice. And if you can't get dice, you can find apps and websites and things like that to randomly roll dice or generate numbers. And the way that, a game of Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing works is there's a person who is sort of telling the story. In Vampire, they're called the storyteller. In Dungeons and Dragons, they're called the dungeon master. In most other generic games, they're called the game master or GM. And so that person sort of sets the scene, sets events in motion, and the players have created a character, something like a literary or a fictional character, with their own distinct name and attributes, abilities, hopes, dreams, and fears. And so they choose the actions that their fictional character takes, and they speak in their fictional character's voice. Some people will do voices, and if you can do voices, great. It sort of adds to the experience, but it's not a requirement, But we all sort of sit around together with a character sheet, with dice, and we play pretend. We describe what our characters do or want to do, and then the GM will use dice to sort of introduce an element of chance. Most things that are easily accomplished, walking across the room, opening a door, are easy. You don't have to necessarily use dice or mechanics to do them. Other things that might be more challenging, like, shooting an arrow that hits a specific target while riding horseback, galloping at full speed, might be a little more difficult, even if you're skilled in that. And so the dice are there to introduce the element of chance. We make choices. The GM and the players make choices to sort of move the collaborative storytelling experience along. But the dice are there to help determine whether our choices succeed or fail. Most all these games have very thick books full of rules. It's not necessary that everyone understand them, but the rules are there to make sure that things are fair. So that everyone has sort of the same opportunity to succeed, and doesn't hold some type of advantage over other players. It's also kind of a interesting way to explore some intersocial dynamics. When you sit down with people and you're going to sort of improv act, you have to be confident that you're not going to be ridiculed, you're not going to be mocked, that your choices, even if they are mocked, they're mocked in sort of a loving, appreciative way for someone who is sitting there willing to have their choices, mocked in the same way. So it's a very intimate experience. I'm always very cautious about inviting someone new to my gaming table. I usually want to get to know that person in a social setting beforehand. I certainly wouldn't just invite a stranger. And it's weird because as soon as someone finds out that you play role-playing games or Dungeons and Dragons, they have a cousin or they know a friend, and they want to introduce you so that person can come play and they can play with you. And I get that impulse. I understand it. I know where it comes from. But as someone who has joined a game full of strangers, and someone who has brought a stranger into my midst of very tight-knit friends, it's always a very risky proposition. Because that person doesn't necessarily understand the social dynamics or the pecking order of the people sitting there at the table. And, it's easy to get under some people's skin if you're not careful. It's always important, to treat people like people. And I've found that in those troubling situations, the times when it gets weird is when people aren't being considerate of others, and they aren't, treating people like people. They aren't giving them the benefit of the doubt. Well, we've been sitting here for a few minutes, haven't we? Well, before we go, I want to take a minute or two to thank our sponsors. We have got a couple of new ads here from Fat Pop Cola, and also Fat Pop Cola, the makers of Fat Pop Cream Soda and BBC Root Beer. Learn to Even is brought to you by Fat Pop Cola. Fat Pop Cola, the makers of Fat Pop Cream Soda. Hey, Cletus.
What's up, you sour-faced son of a bitch?
Oh, nothing. Man, it sure is hot out here.
Well, reach on in there in that cooler and grab yourself a Fat Pop.
Woo-wee. That is cold, thick, and chunky.
Them Fat Pop Cream Sodas are thicken your mama's thighs and sweatpants because they're made with real high butterfat cream.
Fat Pop, the makers of High Butterfat Cream Soda, now available in Classic, Boston, and Bavarian Cream. Fat Pop Cream Sodas are all natural. Fat Pop Cream Soda, the soda you can chew. Fat Pop Cola and Fat Pop Cream Soda are registered trademarks of Noblesse Bottling Company. Fat Pop Cream Soda should not be consumed if you have hepatitis A, B, C, or other serious liver conditions. Please consult your doctor before consuming Fat Pop. Please drink responsibly. We've talked about kind of what we're doing during quarantine. We talked a little bit about ASMR, role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons. I hope this was informative. It's sort of hard to be instructive without a little feedback, and I would love to hear from you about what you might want to discuss or hear discussed. Hopefully you're not disgusted by my point of view, but if you aren't, then please share the podcast, subscribe, print flyers, march people in the streets. I'm perfectly willing to sell out to anyone willing to pay, and though I am not a god, you have my permission to worship me. It's all right. I understand. That's all for now. I hope that tonight I managed to help you learn to even.